I watch the two sides of the pelvis, that I want them to go like, like this. And the tail, if she had a tail, would go boom, boom, like a metronome. You don't want the tail going to one side like that. And then you want to watch the flight, and I haven't seen her walk, so I have no idea. She could be perfect, she could be a mess. I want to watch the flight of each limb, and so you want, the limb should move. So the left side of her pelvis is just a teeny bit higher, and both hind legs she's ever so slightly taking outward. So imagine you're straight, I feel like I'm landing heavier on the left. So I might just pet her all over first, and maybe she'll realize I come in peace. So a lot of times, just petting them can tell you a lot. You can feel cold spots of muscle that's been in spasm and hasn't been used for a long time. You can feel other areas of muscle spasm. So just petting her, she's got a muscle spasm right. A lot of horses will be sore here with bitting issues. The cervical spine, I'll do it from both sides. As Anna was pointing out, this cervical spine is going like this. That's wrong. It should have an S curve. It should be like this. And that might be, you should only, the thoracic vertebrae end at the end of the rib cage. Here's the rib cage. The sternum is right here. This is the area that you sit on. If your saddle is too long, let's say she was a little pony, you'd be back of the lumbar spine, and that can cause a lot. Or they'll be uneven, and that indicates either a dental problem or a atlas axis problem. So hers are nice and flat, so I'm not worried about the dentistry, and they're even. So I will palpate the temporal mandibula. Temporal mandibula is good. I'm looking for anything from just tightening the mouth to running out of the ring, hysterical. So. And also, just as Anna would say, this is overdeveloped here. I usually see this in typically like insulin-resistant horses or Cushing's horses, but the rest of her body doesn't fit it. So I don't know what that's about. It could be related to the way the neck is, but we'll see. Okay. So I'm just going to, the main meridian that we use for diagnostics, and you can't do this in dogs and people. Horses are lucky that we get to do this, or we're lucky. It runs from inside the eye over the top of the head, about 3 inches from the spine. Right here it splits into two, like railroad tracks, comes down here and joins up together and then finishes up right here. This area of the back, it's like a fuse box for the internal organs. Each of the points along here is associated with an internal organ. So I will go through these. So typically this point will be sore with an opposite hind limb problem or cervical issues. I don't get anything there. Nothing there. This will be sore with typically front end ligament issues. Nothing there. This will be sore with the knee. Nothing there. This starts with heart, lung, goes across till you get to stomach here, kidney. But typically where they're sore here is usually saddle issues. So I'll go across. So a little bit, but nothing much. This is probably stifle. That's a local hock point. These are local stifle points here, but I'm not getting any. That's hip. And this is usually, there are several points around the hip. These 3 points around here, which aren't sore on her, will be sore if it's a bone issue. If it's a soft tissue issue, she's sore right here. And her atlas is, so I'm facing you guys, her atlas is like this. And it's kind of moved in several directions. It's also, so if this is the atlas, it's moved like this and then rotated a little bit that way. So I'm going to adjust it in 2 ways. So the other thing too, if you guys can see, let me see if it's obvious from this side. If you guys look at this angle, do you see how it's kind of humpy? And she's like this. That angle between her skull and her first cervical vertebrae is very acute. I usually see that again. It could be pulled back on the cross ties, could have been tied, pulled backwards, almost like a whip. Pleasure, trail horses, usually twice a year. There are some horses that will hold their adjustments a year. But if you've got bad shoeing, bad teeth, bad saddle, bad riding, bad footing, bad stall. So, and then I always, don't forget being a regular veterinarian, I always palpate the tendons. often the high suspensories will be sore if they have an issue with it. You can see you got motion all the way through here. If you come on this side, it just kind of jams ever so slightly. You still get motion through here. And she's not bad. I mean, there are horses that it's like steel. She's going to take the vertebrae side to side, trying to find motion slightly. That's good. She's not. And then I'll ask her to bring her back up. So typically a horse that will have ulcers or back pain will present this. So I'll tickle her belly. And this is also a way, she's got very good range of motion. See her back came up? And then what I'll do is I'll palpate these withers and see if they're sore anywhere. I find if I get the back into extension, meaning it comes up and then I repalpate it, I can get even a little more information. So I go an inside circle, an outside circle. And actually she feels very limber, very loose. So I haven't cleared the left arm yet. So there's a joint between the sacrum and the transverse process, the sideways process of the last lumbar vertebrae called the intertransverse joint, and that's probably it. So I'll adjust that.
But I'm thinking about pony, right, ponies, they lock up. And they always go in the same direction. No, I make them cross eights. I refuse to keep them on the ground. I like to keep like.
There's still a teeny bit of hip pain here, so I'm going to adjust her a while. So the muscles want to go back that way.
Gotcha.
So what I want to do is take the tension out of the muscles so she's straight then. So she doesn't
So
like.
she holds the correction.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Not long at all. So I know this sounds really lame, but I direct however much the point wants.
Which man?
Now, I'm using a thicker pad
Okay.
for her withers. Is there something different that would
Yeah.
be more comfortable for her withers?
Let me see
or-
this saddle
okay.
first. So I'll ask you actually to go ahead and put it on. So typically, most of the show barns, like in Fairfield County, they'll put the saddle on up too high. So I typically ask the client to put on the saddle, or I have to teach the grooms to put on. You should have at least several fingers in between the pommel and the wither. So this might be, it's probably a good thing you put a little bit extra padding to get that up. Then I feel along the panels to see if they're smooth. She's a little bit on the lumbar spine, so you have to watch that a little bit. You've just got like that much on the lumbar spine, but not a teeny bit of a rock, but it's not bad. So now that, it's obvious that Donna knows where to place the saddle, this is what I'll usually see. So it always has to go behind the scap. You all see the horses, the girth is jammed up here. It just depends where the girth line is and where the saddle's sitting. This is an adjustable gullet, I think. Yeah, yeah, it is. So I want to see what's like with the pad.
Yeah.
And you might be able to go to just the next side up in the gullet.
Okay.
But in a case like this, if it ain't broke, just very briefly, I check the tree, I put the pommel against my belly, the cantle against my belly, pommel against the front. I pull towards me, I look for any kind of bending, do diagonal. Any kind of major wrinkling is an indication that the tree is starting to go or the tree is breaking. You'll typically find if, I've had the saddle for 28 years and you pull on the tree and you'll see like one side will go like that.
What about the flex trees?
They'll give quite a bit, but they'll give evenly. Like they won't, like you'll flex them and they'll just kind of bend like a bow. Whereas if this tree was broken, we'd get like a feeling of like a crack and a hinge. Thank you. English is a second language. And then I look down at the symmetry of the saddle, front to back. Many saddles are crooked. A lot of times they'll use a very green wood and they'll put the leather on the wood before it's dried and then they dry it. I'll also feel for lumps or bumps. So the saddle is very symmetrical. A lot of times like with a wool flock saddle, the wool will ball up over time and you need to restuff it or it'll pack down like an old man.